Welcome back to episode 10 of the Star Wars Newsnet
Double digits, baby.
timeline show. Double digits, Brian. We've made it. We're in the double digits, but unfortunately for those listening, we have not made it out of phase 2 of the High Republic yet. I mean, sorry. Fortunately, we still get to talk about phase 2 of the High Republic. Of course, we love this era in Star Wars. And I say that facetiously because we do love phase 2 of the High Republic. We really do. But we've just been camping out here for, a long time.
Minute, yeah.
We have a hot minute, which I guess if you think about it, this is only a fraction of the amount of time we'll probably be spending on phase 1 of the High Republic, giving everything that came out for that era. So it's all good. It's all good. My name is Tyler. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Timeline Show. As always, it's me and my good friend, Mr. Brian. Brian, been a long weekend, but are you ready to talk some Star Wars?
Yeah, let's see if we can navigate this book. It's been a hot minute since I read it, so I may need a refresher on it a little bit here and there. You may need to remind me of a couple things in this book. There's a couple things like toward the end, like the big climactic stuff that I remember very vividly.
Oh, so of course.
When we get to that point, and some big revelations that come, I think I'll be good, but I might need some help and some refreshers for the first half of this book.
Of course. And the Timeline Show, for those tuning in for the first time, where you just come out here, we're going to talk about every single story in canon Star Wars. And there are lots of stories that most people are just unfamiliar with because there's so many different eras, comics, timelines that, kind of interweave and intersect, and it's easy to miss out on things. We have, even in just the short time of doing the show, have been like, wait, does that come before this? And we go maybe a little out of order here, but the important thing is like we're going as sequentially as we can.
Yeah.
And it's also just a place for you to get what every kind of canon story, is in the timeline. And it's pretty cool to have that in one place, if you ask me. So, Brian, why don't you pop that thumbnail up? Because today we are going to be talking about The High Republic, The Path of Vengeance by Cavan Scott, one of the titans of the Star Wars, author circle, I guess. And this is, again, High Republic Phase 2, content in the year 382 BBY, a massive year in the galaxy far, far away.
It was a busy
massive
year.
This came out June 6, 2023. If you want, a written form of a review for this book, I did review this book for Star Wars Newsnet. You can find that on the website if you go search for Path of Vengeance. But Brian, this book was the kind of end all be all for this era of this phase 2 era. This kind of wrapped everything up, and now we're going to be talking about some more phase 2 things, just because I haven't finished reading Quest for Planet X yet, so we're going to come back and do an episode on that. And then the new Tales of Enlightenment kind of short story book just came out, so we're going to go ahead and just wrap that up and do another episode of phase 2. Then we'll get into phase 1. But this book put a bow on the second era basically of the High Republic, and we've been talking for a while here about how much we love the characters of this era, but we maybe like some of the story aspects of future things. We love these characters so much, and it's really exciting to be able to talk about the last book in here. This one was not my favorite. I'll be honest. This was not my favorite. It was good. It was solid, but this was probably, do you remember kind of like Out of the Shadows or some of those other young adult novels from phase 1? We haven't talked about in the show yet, but that were, they're solid books, but I'm not picking this one up if I'm going back to phase 2. I'm probably going to Cataclysm again or Convergence again. Honestly, I'd probably rank this the least of the novels for phase 3 if I had to pick. Just even throwing in the middle grade novels. But that's not to say this wasn't a good one. Like you enjoyed this book, right?
It was a fun read, but it kind of threw me off because there's some huge points. Like last week we talked about the Night of Sorrows and the big battle that was going on with the Path of the Closed Fist now, and with the Jedi and everything going on Dalna. And for some reason, like, this isn't the main novel in everything. This is, that middle grade novel. But for some reason, some of the huge revelations for the entire phase are in the end of this one, and some of the huge events are in this one. So it was kind of weird that they would drop it in this one and not like the Del Rey novel, like the adult novel. Some of this stuff I feel like should have been in that book. But we'll get to it. But yeah, no, it was still a fun
Mhm.
read.
And
Yeah,
for a young adult book, it is massive. Like it is a thick book. Like
it is.
this
It's
book
beefy.
is bigger than Cataclysm. I think in
Yeah,
page count, it might be longer than Cataclysm. And so, I mean, Cavan Scott didn't hold anything back. There were a lot of things I wanted answers to in this book that we didn't get. That would have maybe given some clarity on things from phase one. I think
yeah,
I'm going to go ahead and go on a limb here and trust that in phase three, they're going to wrap all of this together because we still have an entire phase of High Republic publishing that is in the works right now coming out that we're going to get a lot of these answers for in the future. But there
yeah,
were, I think, some questionable decisions in what to leave out. And there's a few things I didn't appreciate about this one that I think Cataclysm did a much better job of. But there
yeah,
are a lot of important story things to hit on this one. The Some of the planets that we visit in this book are really, really cool and could
yeah,
open up interesting pathways for future Star Wars storytelling,
yeah.
even
Maybe.
in beyond phase three. Who knows? We don't know what's going to happen in phase three, but when I think about Planet X in general and the possibilities of what you could do with Planet X and future storytelling and Star Wars, it's really exciting. And we're going to talk about Planet X in this book. But
Yeah,
Brian, in order to begin this novel, we have to venture back to a time that we are familiar with at this
yeah,
point, or we should be familiar with at this point, and that is the Battle of Jeddah. And
yeah.
Brian, I
Once
know you
again,
like Battle of Jeddah. You
it's
know
all
that
right.
I was at this point when I'm reading this book, I was a little bit burnt out on Battle of Jeddah when I read this
Yeah,
book when it first came out in June because of all the other stuff that had already come out. I was kind of like, oh my gosh, you're hitting this, hammer, you nail into the ground. It's like the screw, like when you're drilling it in and like the drill's making that noise of like you need to stop like drilling and you just keep going and you end up ruining it. Like that's how it kind of felt for me. It didn't ruin
just beating a
the
dead
battle, but
horse.
I
Yeah,
did want to. It was more about how do I get through this into the next section of the book versus because it takes a big chunk of the first book. But we
yeah,
get the Battle of Jeddah from Marta's perspective, and we
yep,
see the demons that she's struggling with in real time during this battle. I want to know what you go ahead and elaborate on those particular demons and those things that she's seeing and visualizing, and then talk about like
yeah.
what you enjoyed from this book on seeing Marta's perspective of the Battle of Jeddah.
Well, she's still dealing with the whole Kevmo thing. For some of the other books we've talked about, that's one ghost that just keeps haunting her from her past. Is this, and it's not even
Mhm.
really Kevmo's actual ghost. It's just this memory that this subconscious that keeps haunting her and taunting her. About what's going
Mhm.
on and stuff. And yeah, she gets wrapped up in the Battle of Jeddah. And basically, yeah, you're right. The whole first act of this book is the Battle of Jeddah from her point of view, which we hadn't seen yet. We had heard
Right.
snippets of it from the comics and stuff with Marta, radioing for Yana, come help in the city and stuff, but we hadn't seen it from her point of view yet. Yeah, she is she this is when she takes somebody's life for the first time with Kevmo's
Mhm.
lightsaber. And
Mhm.
it's she's dealing with seeing the battle play out, and then there's path members that what was the name of the path member she came across, because he comes up later in, I think, quest for no not quest for Planet X, maybe it is quest for Planet X. I can't think of his name right now though. But he was kind of like a newer member, if I remember right.
Right. If you're asking me about Quest for Planet X, I actually haven't,
No, no,
gotten to
no,
that book yet.
not
That's the one that I'm opening up. So
there
I
was a
don't
path
remember
member
the
that
name of
was
that path member.
getting he was basically getting beat up and assaulted, if I remember right, and she
Hmm.
stepped in to save him, if I remember right. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that, she
I
ends up
don't
taking
I
somebody's
don't
life.
remember that part.
I
I'm not
don't
saying
either. Like
I'm sure that happened. It's just the battle.
yeah,
There's so much going
it
on. It's
seems
hard to keep
like
everything
it's
straight.
yeah,
The main points from the battle that are important are that she uses Kevmo's lightsaber
yeah,
to kill people for the first time, and it takes a bigger toll on her than she's expecting.
yes,
Not that she's ever expecting to have to be killing people, but it's like the classic story you see with anyone when they take their first life in a book, a movie. Like it haunts them, and she's already
right,
being haunted by the ghost of Kevmo Zink. The young Jedi she fell in love with and she's continually haunted by him, seeing him whenever she's trying to make a decision, almost doubting her. Like he's almost doubting her and doubting what she's supposed to believe in, and she's wrestling with this back and forth of like, who am I? What am I supposed to do? Get out of my head, sort of thing. And the battle is pretty chaotic, but she saves someone. I don't think this may not be who you're talking about. I don't think it is, but she does save Bocana, who is someone that they become very close with in this book.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
and she becomes her new love interest in the book, and Bocana and her, like, they help each other heal because he's going through a lot. Bacana's going through a lot as well, and Marta's obviously still dealing with the trauma of Kevmo. Now I'm curious when this whole romance element came about, and to me it felt a little forced in the book. Like it didn't really feel natural, and maybe it was supposed to feel that way, like Marta's trying too hard to move on from Kevmo, and so she latches herself on to the next person that shows her a lot of attention and affection, is like almost like this rebound effect, and Bacana is kind of mesmerized by Marta. She saved his life and saved him on the Battle of Jeddah, and he feels like he owes her, but then also is attracted to her, and he's not afraid of the fact that she's an Everini, and that's something that she values because most people are afraid of her species in general. So the two of them kind of end up together, so to speak, in the calamity that's going on in the Battle of Jeddah. And really, the Battle of Jeddah, it doesn't serve as like a major pivotal point in this book. It's more about Marta, Bacana getting together, and you're introducing the fact that Marta's wrestling with the ghost of Kevmo Zink, like in what his legacy was to her. Like that's basically what it's trying to do, is show you just how haunting it is for her. Now that took a few hundred pages, to do for Marta. And then on the flip side, you have Yana, who's been with the Herald and then having to try to escape out of the statue. Yes. And so the Herald is arrested. And the mother puts out this, the Path of the Open Hand puts out this little broadcast basically saying, we disown the Herald and his actions, we disavow him, he acted of his own accord, not with any, basically just trying to shift all the blame onto him and deflect away from the fact that they were she was responsible. And Yana goes and breaks him out of prison, and she has a frank conversation with him. It's basically I don't like you, you don't like me, we kind of hate each other, but we both want revenge, like against the mother.
Right.
I hate the mother, but she also wants to get Marta out of the path. She wants to go back to her family, get Marta out, and they both want revenge against the mother. So these two unlikely allies end up coming together in order to try to, overthrow the mother. What did you think about this interesting alliance, so to speak, right now?
No, there was a lot that got brought up during their conversation too, especially with and I always have a hard time remembering her name, but it's the Herald's daughter. It was Yana's love interest. Her girlfriend, basically, who died horribly, by the way. She died horribly. Core, that's right. Yeah, thank you. She was Core. When she basically goes in under the guise of wanting to basically interrogate him and breaks him out. And the whole conversation of them breaking out was kind of interesting. And this whole, basically the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. You know what I mean?
That's the gist of what happened.
Yeah, basically. And so they have different goals, but they want to go about it different ways. The Herald is wanting to go about it a completely different way than what Yana is wanting to go about it. But yeah, no, when she broke him out, I'm just like, oh, here we go. Know where they're going to end up back at Dalna. And
where everyone ends up.
Right. And the mother putting out this broadcast, and not only does she put the broadcast out, but she offers to donate like millions of credits to help repair the damage and everything for the Republic. So, when he finds out she basically threw him under the bus. Yeah, right. And so when he finds out she threw him under the bus the way she did, he's locked, cocked, ready to rock to go
he's ready. He is ready. And you said, like, of course they end up back at Dalna. Who wasn't at Dalna? Anyone worth anything in the
Everybody and
year
their mother, no
382
pun intended.
BBY
Yeah.
was at, everyone and their mother.
No pun intended. I swear.
Oh man, that's a good one. That's a good one.
I
You
thought
should
I
have
thought it
just
was
said
good.
you should have gone with that. Like
Everyone and
you
their
should have.
mother.
Everyone and their mother was at Dalna. If you weren't at Dalna during this time, like were you really anyone of
Be
significance
there,
at
be
all?
square. Yeah.
Pretty much, like you risk dying a horrible, horrible death, but
Right.
you get to be a
Well,
part of the Night of Sorrow.
even when we talk about it later on, the quest for Planet X, there's even a moment in that book where this whole thing is happening over here, and then it crosses over into the
Still,
battle,
we
going on
still
in Donna
end
at
up
one
back
point.
at Donna. We
Yeah,
still end up
everybody
back at Donna.
does, and they're like in and then back out before they even realize, that they're there. But yeah, everybody was there.
So the last little bit with Jeddah before we get into the main bulk of the story that I want to
Yeah.
talk to you, because we talked, obviously there's more with the Battle of Jeddah with this book, but we've talked so much about the Battle of Jeddah. I don't want to spend too much time breaking it down. Like we
Right.
kind of give like the key points, like Marta Bakana get together. She's using Kevmo's lightsaber. She's seeing quote unquote seeing Kevin's ghost and
Even
being
getting the
haunted
littles
by him.
involved in the battle and everything.
Yes, the littles are being involved in the
Yeah.
battle. Young Bulan is being involved in this book quite a
Yeah.
bit, and we'll be talking about him more as the
Yes.
books and the phases continue. And then you have like the mother retreating, the herald is captured, Yana breaks the herald out, and then on the Jedi side of this was kind of, I felt a little bit frustrated with the Jedi portion of the story because you have Maddie Catley, who is the Padawan now to Vildar Mac. We talked about Maddie in the comics,
Right.
and then Olivia Zeveron, who is, those are going to be your main two Jedi for this that were introduced briefly in the comics. It felt weird that we were now getting introduced to them in such a heavy way in this book after never seeing them in another
anywhere else.
Anywhere else besides the comics. And in the comic run, they are both, I don't want to say like underserved like too much in the comics, but because they're not the focus, it's not like they're the focal point of those comics, but there was a lot more I think to be explored with them in those comics that kind of got ignored for them to now suddenly be at like the forefront of a novel. And then the way I felt like the books was written, it felt like we were supposed to have like a deep attachment to these characters already,
Right.
even though we've
By the
barely
time we got
spent
to
any
this,
time
yeah.
with them in a comic. Like it's just like you should expect like to know these characters by then. I'm like, I don't know them at all, really, outside of Maddie's a chatterbox and Olivia's like leave me alone vibes pretty much all the time. Right. And so these two are going to go to Dalna on like the fact-finding mission because Olivia has beef, for obvious reasons that we're going to get into later. And then Maddie is just, she's assigned to the mission. She wants to go to the mission. And Vildar says, look out for her because something's going on with Olivia. We just don't know what it is. And it's an odd pairing because you have Maddie, who's super chatty, talkative, and like wants to be the social butterfly. And Olivia's kind of a bit standoffish, a bit leave me alone, don't talk to me too much. What do you think about the dynamic between these two?
I love seeing that dynamic because it was the same way with Vildar, in the comics, and I love that. But there's something else we got to keep in mind too that we talked about in the comics. I think 2 or 3 episodes ago, there was a frame that was kind of out of place in the comic where Olivia kind of had this like flash of a vision of this baby. You remember that with this baby floating blocks?
Right.
Remember we talked about that? We said it was going to come into play later on in the future.
Of course.
She's still thinking about that also at this point, and then everything going on with the path and everything. So I just wanted to throw that out there too as a callback to one of our earlier episodes where we talked about that. I wanted to bring it back to the forefront because it's going to matter here in a little bit.
It's
the answer for it finally.
A critical point, and you understand at the end why Olivia is so invested in this, in the path and in seeing this mission through.
Yes.
So when Marta gets back, and they get back on the Gaze Electric, they all get back to Dalna. Sunshine Dobbs, we've talked about a little bit, kind of this smuggler, prospector type guy that's infatuated with the mother and wanting to do anything for her. He's the one that brought her a nameless egg. He's there, and he is going to take a team back to Planet X, which is the home planet of the Nameless, where the eggs were first gotten. And he's going to take, wants to take a team out there to bring back more nameless creatures, more eggs for the Path of the Open Hand for the future. They want to add to their current, supply, because the leveler is great. But what if we add an army of these things, so to speak, is basically what's being discussed. And I want to talk about Planet X for a while. So Sunshine Dobbs takes them to Planet X. You have Marta and Bacana. Marta basically forces her way onto this mission. She's starting to get very assertive after the Battle of Jeddah. She's starting to be very sure of herself, becoming a rising star in the path. Like, she is now more than just their guide. People are looking to her for leadership too. And so she even flexes her muscle, and she goes and I'm going to prove myself to you, the mother. I could do what I want. And she goes on this mission. And then we meet Shay, who is pregnant at the time, although we don't know it at the time that she is pregnant. And she's just another, person that's being recruited by Sunshine to go off on this. And it's like a bit of a team.
Yeah.
Planet X is a crazy place, Brian.
It is ridiculous.
For those who are not familiar with the book that much and are just trying to get a brief synopsis on canon stories, think about the Mortis arc, maybe. I think it's a good place to think of if you're curious about Planet X, this kind of a mythical place that is just strangely in tune with the Force and really, I guess, like it's almost like a Force planet, so to speak. Kind of like Mortis is like a home of yes, very similar to Mortis. And there are, for instance, when you get on the planet, to even get into the planet, there's these like giant, there's called the Veil, and it's this giant like plasma ion lightning storm cloud that's like we almost preventing you from trying to get in. It's almost like the planet itself is trying to protect what it has and doesn't want outsiders even getting in. It's almost like the Force itself is saying you don't belong here if you're not from here. And they take casualties even getting on there. Like, not all the ships make it through, and they're all banged up and hurt. And it's just some of the things that this planet does. It almost makes you drunk with the Force. It makes you feel super good all the time. Their wounds are healing very quick. Like, it's almost like you go there. It's like a back to tank on steroids almost. And so, what were your first impressions of Planet X? Did you? We're gonna talk about the Eye of the Storm comics later on, but we do visit Planet X in those. And so I had already read those before reading this book. So you kind of knew it's a very colorful, vibrant place. What did you think of Planet X when you first were diving into this book as they were describing it?
You hit the nail on the head with the Mortis thing. It's not Mortis by any means, but it's along those same lines of just being that ridiculously strong with the Force. And it's and like you said, being drunken with the Force, that's a great way to put it, because some of these people, Marta and her love interest, they're talking back and forth about just abandoning everything and just staying here on this planet, because everything is just so perfect. And it's a wild, like you said, very colorful, very vibrant place. And it almost feels like that these nameless creatures just could not possibly be from this planet. Right. With everything going on. You know what I mean? They just could not possibly. But at the same time,
Force eaters are from the planet.
Right. That is just vibrant in the Force. And so it would almost make sense, in this weird, twisted way that they would come from this planet, because they could just, live on the Force essence that's basically being put off by the planet. And it's not even just that people are healing. The planet itself heals. There are, planets there. I mean, ships that are coming in and leaving these giant skid marks, and these giant trenches from crashing. Those markings are healing, basically. Those scars are healing within hours, really. You know what I mean? The planet, even the ships that are crashing, the planet is kind of taking them over and kind of absorbing them, if you would. So this is a wild planet. I love it.
So I do have a theory on the Nameless that I wonder, and who knows with all of this, are they inherent? I don't know. Like, I wonder if they're like inherently evil or not. And I wonder if when they're being used outside of this planet, because they're born on a planet that's so in tune with the Force and is so Force centric, like this nexus, like you talked about. I wonder if when they're taken out of that environment, like the only way that it's almost like being
And it starts
like
to corrupt
starving,
them.
like you're
Yeah.
starving and you need something to live. Like you see anything, you're going to eat it. And so any type of force user that's giving off
Right.
this like aura of the force, like they need that almost to survive. Or like, I guess in a more crude way of saying is almost like if a drug addict that is trying to get, off their addiction, and then like, they're when you having those withdrawals and you just
Yeah.
want to take anything that could like get you that, fix that you need. I wonder if that's a similar thing going on with the nameless when they're maybe not evil creatures, but when you take them and you just remove them from their crutch, the thing that they've known, like suddenly, they have to feed. That's
Yeah.
like kind of a prediction I have going forward
Yeah.
because there's like a book
Yeah.
coming out called Tears of the Nameless, and I'm wondering if we're gonna get some backstories, and suddenly we're gonna be like, oh, these creatures, and then I get
Yeah.
into the whole prophecy
There,
with Master and Apprentice where it talks about like the sins to the nameless, and everything.
mhm. Yeah, like I mean, the
Like
nameless are just
there's,
as much a victim as anybody else. Yeah.
mhm. And so two things I want to talk about with this planet: the underdwellers and the protector. So we all thought, oh my gosh, these nameless creatures are terrifying. There are other creatures on planet X that are scarier and like seemingly more powerful than the, nameless when they take
Yeah.
the eggs, and there's these creatures called the underdwellers that are trying to attack them and kill them. And you're like, these things are scarier and more terrifying than the nameless. And then you have this creature called the protector who's almost like protecting the eggs, like doesn't want them to get
Right.
taken away. It's like trying to prevent it, and it's this massive like creature that they're terrified of. And so I'm wondering, Brian, which one are you more scared of first, and second, how much possibility is there with storytelling? Obviously, Phase 3, I would be shocked if Phase 3 doesn't dive into some Planet X elements to some degree,
Yeah.
but what kind of storytelling possibilities are there with something, even whether it's animation, a movie, whatever, just with this
Yeah.
whole, because in something that
The
Star
whole
Wars hasn't
system.
done a
Yeah.
lot in live action or even animation, they don't get into these like force, like animals or force creatures necessarily.
Right.
We have like force sensitive beings, but like
Right.
not necessarily these like creatures and everything. I think that the possibilities are endless when you have a planet like Planet X.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. The underdwellers are absolutely terrifying. And the way it's written in the book too. I remember this when they're in the cavern and they're taking the eggs, they're actively collecting the eggs and putting them in
Mhm.
these bags. The first time they come up, because I mean, when they first come in and start attacking everybody, it's basically every man for himself, just trying to get out as fast as possible and
Right.
and trying to get as many eggs out as you can also. And once they even get out of the cave and away from them, that's not even the end of it. Like they're
Right.
still getting chased all the way to the ship, and it's and even when they're getting on the ship and trying to take off, and it's still hanging on the side of the ship, basically trying to rip them out. It's absolutely terrifying. And the protector, oh no, it was the protector that was trying to rip him out of the ship, if I remember right. Now
Yes.
that I'm thinking about it, right. But even the protector, the protector and these underdwellers start fighting in front of them, and you're like, oh, the protector's trying to protect them. No, not by
He's
any means at
against
all.
the protector is
None of
against the
them are on their side.
underdwellers, and
Yeah.
now it's going, oh, you're trying to take these off this planet.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to end you now.
Yes.
And then to even get off the planet, you got to go back through the veil. It's like
Back
there's
through the
no
veil. Yeah.
even, way that you could possibly survive, it seems. But they find a
Right.
way. Like a handful of them find a way, like Dobbs and
Yeah.
Marta and Bacana, and then
And they
Shay.
lose some of them along the way on the
Yeah,
planet.
several of them are lost on the way. Shay loses, her partner, and we find out then later on that she's pregnant. Like this isn't necessarily consequential to the story, so we could just
Right.
talk about that real quick. She's pregnant, and she's going to name her child Mari, which we are led to believe, even though Shay. The interesting thing is Shay's not a Santeca, but
that
we
know of. Yeah.
that we, like at this point that we know of.
Right.
But we're led to believe that her daughter Mari is going to be Mari Santeca, who has a massive role to play in Phase 1 of the High Republic. And so that was like an interesting tidbit, but it was like, we're not going to give you much on that right now. We're just going to throw this little nugget out there for you and then just kind of let you nibble on that for a while. And then we might come back to it later. What do you think about that one?
No, I liked it a lot. I like it when they drop little Easter eggs like this and little connections back to phase 1, because it reminds you that this is all still very much connected, because phase 2 and phase 1 are two very different stories
Right.
that are being told, but they are related in these like very minute ways. And we'll talk about it when we get into phase 1 a little bit more, but there's a moment with uh the lady, I can't what's her name, the old lady from the Santecas. I can't think of her name. The
Talk
one
about
that's
Mari.
coming up with the paths. Is it
Yeah,
Mari?
Mari.
Mari.
Yes,
Okay, okay.
that is Mari
So
Santeca.
that's
Yes.
right. That's right. So when she tells Vernestra Rowe, when she's whispering in her ear, we still don't know what she whispered in her ear. We're all the way through
Right.
phase 1. We're into phase 3 at this point. We still don't know what was whispered. I'm thinking at this point, and we'll talk about it later, but I'm thinking, it's the path to this planet, to Planet X that she told
Mhm.
Vernestra about. So,
That's what I think.
but it's nice
Have you
seeing those
read
little
Path of
connections.
Vengeance? Have you read Path of Vengeance?
Path of Vengeance.
Or sorry, Path of Vengeance. Oh my gosh.
That's what we're.
No. Have you read?
Yeah, a
What's the
long time
book?
ago.
Oh, what's the book? The one that I just got done reviewing, the newest one, that just
The Defy the
Tempest.
Storm.
Defy the Storm.
I haven't. No, I haven't got it.
Have
I
you
haven't
read
got
Path of
to.
Vengeance? We're talking
I'm
about
still
Path
on
of
Eye of
Vengeance.
Darkness. I'm still on Eye of
Path of
Darkness.
Vengeance, yes. So they talk about some path. Like there's some Path of Vengeance. Oh my gosh, Defy the Storm stuff
You
that
got it. It's
happens
okay.
in this book. This is ridiculous. I feel like there's a the other day I was teaching a lesson and on elaboration, and I love all my kids. I love all my kids, but there was like this moment where I was trying to explain, like, all right, so elaborate on this, and they were like, okay, I don't know how to do this. Like, okay, well, how does think about a concert that you like. Who would you like to go see? They're like, I would love to go see The Weeknd in concert. And I was like, well, how does that make you feel? He's like, well, it makes me feel great. Like, I love them, and I would be excited to jump up and down at their concert. I'm like, okay, now just tell me what you put, like elaborate on that in a sentence. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, well, no, what you just told me, like write it down. I don't know what I said. And like that's why I feel like I'm at right now. I feel like I'm the student that's
It's
like,
been a long
I don't
week.
I don't understand. Like what Path of Vengeance, Defy the Storm, like what are these books? They all just kind of blend together right now. And so I apologize to everyone for that little detour. So they escape Planet X. And
Yeah.
let's go back now because Yana and the Herald have made their way back into the fold.
Back to
And
Donna,
Yana
right.
makes an interesting friends, the kind of an ally that I never really would have paired with when they end up meeting with the Jedi. And Yana meets with Maddie and becomes kind of friends with Maddie Cathly in this whole undercover on Dalna, trying to figure out what's going on. And Yana's made it very clear that she's only going along with the path because of Marta for right now, and she just wants to get out.
Yeah.
She's even less focused on revenge at this point and more about how she can escape and just get out and be free. And her and Maddie kind of make this weird alliance, looking out for each other, sharing information. What did you think about the two of them forming this unlikely bond?
Yeah, no, I liked it a lot, and it's one of those things too. It like you said, everybody is at Dalna, and you almost have to have some of these alliances like this. And with Yana, it makes sense because that's throughout the entire phase 2. That's been her mission, was to get away from the path and everything. And so when the Jedi show up, she's gonna be the first to make it known. Hey, I'm not with them. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here as much as you don't want to be here. I'm just trying to get my cousin and get out. So no, I thought it made a lot of sense. And it plays out really well.
So the two of them it's so interesting with the two of them because they are very different in terms of ideology, in terms of background, and so for the two of them to even come together at all feels strange, let alone that Olivia doesn't necessarily approve of any of this at the same time.
Right.
And then you factor in Marta's relationship with the path when she returns from Planet X, and things get a little bit interesting. Do you remember off the top of your head how that all goes down, or would you like
yeah, I don't remember that off the top of my head.
Okay, so remember this. I'm sure this will all come back to you right now.
It'll start, yeah.
So whenever they get back, they're very dangerous. Marta essentially almost takes leadership of the path at that point.
Right.
Yeah. And almost is like declaring the war on the Jedi and declaring war on everything as it unfolds. And she's kind of taking over.
The name of the group, yeah.
And the mother, because Yana wants to leave, and the mother instead of trying to combat what Marta is doing, the mother almost latches herself onto Marta, like, you finally have grown into who I believe. Like, this is your champion path. This is what we've wanted. And she's almost leeching off of Marta's newfound leadership because she can see the tide turning. And she's like, okay, I want to be a part of this. And so let's go ahead. We can talk about that. The Herald kind of starts buying into this whole path of the closed fist stuff too, because Yana says, we're no longer the path of the open hand. The Jedi are here. They're coming for us. We have more of these nameless creatures now. It is time for us to assert ourselves. We're no longer the path of the open hand. We are the path of the closed fist, and we are going to let them know who we are, and they're going to know what we can do. And the Herald even starts buying in on all of this, and he gets like, he's drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And Yana's like, how are we going to get out of here? And Marta just has become crazed with vengeance at this point. And due to everything that happened to her on Planet X, how it ended with Bacana, like how she feels like the mother has betrayed her, how she feels like the Herald is in for himself, and she's basically asserted control. And her and Yana are at odds, and not getting along too well is putting an understatement on it. So we're familiar with the Night of Sorrow. We read Cataclysm. So let's go ahead and jump into the Night of Sorrow, because from Marta's perspective, and Marta, they're sending off everyone into battle. We're familiar with Enforcer droids are here. The Nameless are everywhere. And Marta is pretty staunch on, she doesn't want, she just wants, everyone to feel the wrath of the path. The wrath of the path. I did not mean to.
Look at that.
And
poet and didn't know it.
The poet dropping bars here. And she feels like the mother has betrayed them, essentially, because the mother has kind of checked out. She's trying to even escape on her own. She's trying to do her own thing. And she's like, aren't you supposed to be our leader? She's like, well, I'm the leader now, basically. And so the moment of truth really came for Marta when the Nameless themselves started attacking the littles and the children. So the Nameless, and I thought it was kind of the point of the story was that evil doesn't discriminate. And that was a lesson that Marta had to learn, is that, evil doesn't discriminate. And the Nameless that are killing off all these Jedi and other, Force users, they were also going after some of the littles that she's been, taking care of for several years. And we're killing them. And they weren't aware that they were Force sensitive. They were killing them. What did you think when, during the chaos of the Night of Sorrows, that, now all of a sudden little kids are being killed by these creatures? And Marta is the reason for it, because she unleashed all of it. She just unleashed it all.
She's the one that sent them all out onto the battlefield. There were dozens of them. And they were freshly hatched, so they were starving, right? And so she sends them all out. But for them to start attacking the littles, to me, it made a lot of sense, because there's, how many people in the galaxy were Force sensitive that, were never picked up by the Jedi and taken to train or anything, and they just kind of fell through the cracks and just kind of live that way out in the galaxy and don't realize it. You know what I mean? I mean, hell, Anakin was one of them, really, if you think about it. And so there's got to be billions of people out there who were sent. And so for her littles to be attacked like that, I think it was something that was kind of an eye-opener for her.
Right.
Because some of them, she was like, hey, it is what it is kind of thing, until the littles started getting attacked. And it's kind of that eye-opener for her, and, she starts defending the littles against the Nameless at that point.
And she thought the littles would be fine, too, but she was sending some of them into battle. I mean, the mother
trying to set detonation packs on the walls to collapse
the mother and Marta, they sent little Bulin off with a bunch of little Bulin, a little for, the path. They're sending them with explode, like detonators, to blow up, different sections of even where they're living, willing to sacrifice some of their own in order to kill off maybe some Jedi, or hatch an escape route, things like that. It really got out of hand. And Yana finally confronts Marta about this to the point of I'm not going to let you use these littles anymore. I'm not going to let you continue this. We need to leave together. We're family. And Marta she's done. She's become the ultimate. I think you mentioned this, before when we were talking about some of the path of, Battle of Jeddah stuff before. Was borderline to that extremist level.
Yeah.
And now she's full blown extremist,
Chug
and
the Kool-Aid. Yeah.
she uses the lightsaber to sever
Yeah.
Yana's hand and just cuts off her hand. And that was basically their relationship, and the way things are going to leave off is Yana's like, well, I guess you really are serious about all of this now,
Yeah.
if you're going to attack your own at this point. And Marta basically becomes the leader of the path and the leader of what ends up becoming the Nile, the group
Yeah.
that the Nile is born out of. She becomes that leader. And there really is kind of just, I mean, she even does the whole like jagged lines on her
The
forehead,
3 lines.
the
Yeah.
3 lines like the Nile have. She ends up in control of a lot of things, and that's how it all ends with her. What did you think about the way that she cut off Yana's hand? What did you think about the way that that whole relationship
It
kind of finalized itself?
it came full circle. From the get-go of phase 2, when you see Marta Rowe and Yana Rowe, and in phase 1 you've got Marcion Rowe. It just, you can kind of already see where this is going to end up going. It's kind of like when the prequels came out to the classic Star Wars movies. Like, you see Anakin, but you know where he's going to end up. It's got to get to this point. So it's kind of the same thing with phase 2 going into phase 1.
Right.
And so it was nice to see it come full circle. It almost had to come to the end with her and Yana the way it did. It almost had to, because Yana wanted to get, away from everything. Yeah, it was when I do remember reading that portion of the book, because I could not put it down. And I remember thinking, just beat for beat for beat, this was just getting more and more interesting as we went. And I really enjoyed the way that they really tied that story into phase 1 the way they did. Because like I said earlier, phase 2 and phase 1 are two completely different stories. There's no Nihil in phase 2 at all, and there's no Path of the Open Hand in phase 1. Like, it's completely different stories, basically. But it was nice to see it all kind of get wrapped up and tied together so that we
still
could kick off for phase
thread
3.
everything in like a nice tapestry.
Yeah.
And so the
Yeah.
the Night of Sorrows ends, and let's talk about the aftermath of everything, because there was so much chaos that happens in the battle, and we're very familiar. Like, there's losses on every side. Maddie and Olivia basically are fighting for their lives for much of the battle, and they both survived, like, thankfully. Like, I would not, as much as Maddie, I felt like, was underserved in her character arc and development, both in the book and in the comics. I didn't want her to meet an unceremonious end either. And so, if you remember, we talked about, the Quest of the Jedi, which was a one shot that we talked about to start off this whole phase. And there was a Jedi called Aslan Rel that was looking into the rods, and he was looking into how these nameless, he was getting to discover some of the origins of these nameless creatures. Well, he comes full head to head with some nameless, because he's at the Night of Sorrows as well. And essentially, his encounter with the nameless, he lives, but he pretty much goes insane. He's given these horrible visions and hallucinations, and he loses his mind. He's later checked into basically an asylum and keeps a diary on everything that he is seeing and the visions that he's seeing. And you wonder, what is he seeing? Like, what is going on? Because he has a very deep, connection to the nameless that is, and he spends most of his life like looking for that. We'll talk about that later, but like he had it tough in this book in his brief little time. What did you feel bad for poor little Aslan?
Yeah, I did, because I really liked him in that Quest of the Jedi comic. That was the one, he was going, like you said, looking up info in the archives for that purple stone. Remember that they took from the planet that was kind of and so they split that into the two rods, and that was him kind of looking for that. And so, he was watching Jedi die right in front of him from the nameless, and it drove him absolutely nuts. And he was basically turning into a puddle, while everybody else was like, while the other Jedi were kind of bouncing back from that close encounter with the nameless, he just didn't. Like, he just never really regained any composure from moving on. So he there's going to be casualties, and that's very similar to the way things go in war in real life. I mean, some of the things that have happened in wars in real life, I've got buddies that when we went to Iraq, for those of you that don't know, I was in the Army for a few years back in like 2010, 2011, 2012, and some of the things that they saw and had to deal with, it messed up a lot of my buddies,
Hmm.
you know. And so it's very much a real thing, and it just seems like the natural kind of reaction for somebody who survived something like that, that survivor's guilt, the, you know, the fear, that trauma, that PTSD, you know. And so for him, I thought that was kind of a nice touch, that somebody who survived this entire horrific night walked away completely scarred by the
Hmm.
experience.
And that's a great point, Brian. That's from real life experience too. Like that's a great point. That if there are all these, there are, in Star Wars, there's so many big battles and
Yeah.
traumatic events that happen, and if everyone walks away and kind of just wipes their hands clean, it's like, all right,
Yeah.
we moved on, we won, or we lost, or it's over, and there isn't, we don't see like the side effects, the toll that takes, it kind of cheapens the storytelling.
Yeah.
And so, of course, and throughout this, there's going to be people that take away different things. Yana is like the physical embodiment of what happens
Yeah.
in war. She loses her hand. Aslan is like one side of the coin of like he lost everything mentally. And then you have, some Jedi that are able to cope with it in a different way that isn't necessarily healthier or worse than other Jedi or other survivors. But, it
Mm-hmm.
does, I think the High Republic does do a good job of saying like everyone's going to cope with things in their own way. Like
Yeah.
everyone, and it's not always a healthy way. And the good thing about the High Republic too is almost always there's someone, they emphasize the importance of having someone in your corner
Yeah.
that is going to support you through that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately for Aslan, though, it seemed like he was kind of abandoned
He
by
was.
like the order and not necessarily uh welcomed back in with open arms. I'm sure they tried to work with him, but it's like, yeah, we're gonna send him to this asylum
Yeah.
ultimately, and sorry about you.
Yeah.
And the way that the book ends is you get the big reveal at the end. They've captured the mother, and you find out
Yes.
that Olivia and the mother are sisters.
Yeah.
And Olivia was chosen to become a Jedi when they were very young. And Alicia, the mother, remembers that, and she is also force sensitive and has, the nameless, the leveler has slowly been kind of eating away at her,
Feeding on her. Yeah.
feeding on her, but she's been in control of it for the most part for some time, so she's been a little immune, but it's still having effect. But
Yeah.
she, from that moment of not being chosen, not deemed worthy enough to join the Jedi, basically made it her life's mission to
Yeah.
destroy them. The path had already existed before she joined the path, but what she brought to it was a plan of action to radicalize the path and create them into being this force that we see
Mm-hmm.
take on the Jedi, because this was all born out of their own, I guess, even like self-righteousness of deciding who is worthy and who isn't. And
Yeah.
that's a problem that plagues the Jedi for generations to come.
Yes.
Like, and it becomes worse and worse as time goes on of who is worthy to be a Jedi, who who is worthy to continue wearing the robes. Like, you
Yeah.
need to do this, you need to act a certain way, you have to have a certain M count. And Alicia was maybe the first little seed that we saw. The mother was the first little drop in the bucket of the consequences of that attitude can have moving forward. And that was a very poignant story that I think they were trying to tell. A very
Yeah.
interesting, point they were trying to. What did you think about the
I
reveal?
I was my jaw dropped when it got to that point, because it was a callback to that comic, that
Mhm.
frame of the kid with the blocks, you know, and why Olivia was seeing that. It didn't make any sense then. Now it does. And so to see that kind of play out, I remember reading that, and I remember saying, like, act like verbally saying, "Oh my god!" And I remember my wife was
Yeah.
like, "Whoa, what's going on?" I'm like, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," because I've been kind of keeping her up on everything in the Hive, because she doesn't read all the
Yes.
books like I do, but I was
Right.
kind of keeping her. And so I told her what was going on, and it was like, this is really happening. Like, this is insane. And the fact that the leveler had been feeding on her slowly, and she had been trying to stave it off, you know, and
Hmm.
kind of basically she was kind of giving up some of her physicality. Like, she was letting it feed on her in just certain times to keep it going, basically. And it was kind of, if I remember, it was creeping up her arm, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
The calcification, I guess you get, the
Yes.
husking was
Mm-hmm.
kind of going up her arm. But that moment where she finally, it's that classic moment where the villain gets caught finally, and like, this was my whole plan, this is my whole motivation, this is why everything happened the way it did and everything, like, and to see that, to hear it kind of play out, I, honest to God, what I got, the kind of vibe I got was, and maybe I'm crazy,
Right.
was Harry Potter, for anybody who watches Harry Potter, and it was how Petunia kind of felt that Lily got chosen to go to Hogwarts, but Petunia never had the ability, to go. Or I don't know if you've ever seen it, Tyler, but or
I'm
if
a
you've watched it.
massive Potter
Are
fan.
you a big Potterhead?
Yes.
So that's kind of that same resentment that Petunia had
Mm-hmm.
towards Lily is kind of what I felt coming from the mother towards Olivia. And
Okay.
I thought it was really interesting how Olivia was the one that gets to be the one that comes face to face with the mother and confronts her right there at the end like that.
Mm-hmm. And it's not even because the mother Alicia is without ability. She does have force
She
ability.
does have the abilities,
She
right?
is able to do it. It's more of like she can use subtle like mind tricks
Yeah.
or play on people's emotions. That's how
Which
she's
she
able
used
to
a
win people
lot.
over.
Yeah.
Like that's how like Sunshine, like Dobbs does all her work. That's why you see all these people infatuated with her because she
Yeah.
is force sensitive to a degree, which I think everyone kind of suspected that she had some level of force,
Yeah.
attunement, because how else would she be able to do the things that she's doing?
Right.
Unless, it's Star Wars. They can always come up with something.
Right.
But that made the most sense. It was just her being related to a Jedi currently in the Order and then
Yeah.
getting the whole backstory was massive. Well, the mother, much to everyone's delight, and I'm sure yours, did
Yes.
meet an absolutely horrible end
Yes, she
because
did.
they took her prisoner basically, and then Marta comes up with the rod because she is now she's been in control of the leveler for a while. Comes in with the
Yeah.
rod, points it straight at the mother like ruthlessly, and the leveler just feasts
Husks
on
her.
the
Yeah.
mother, and there is no mercy in Marta's eyes. It is pure rage, venom, and you're like, I guess just
Love it.
anger, like I am malevolence, like just
Mm-hmm.
taking it out on her. And then she pretty much just leaves. Like they
Yeah.
let her go. They let
Yeah.
her
She just
go.
goes. She
They
takes the
let her
gaze
go.
electric.
She takes
Yep.
the gaze electric, and her story ends with her being in control of the leveler. Um, on the Gaze Electric, which is Marking Rose flagship
Yep.
in phase one, and she has like the three jagged lines painted on her. They're the path of the closed fist or whatever, open hands, and she's in control. We don't know how the leveler ends up frozen, and her people decide to freeze the leveler, like which happens later. There are
Right.
some unanswered questions in regard to how the Nile end up the way that they are,
Yeah.
but I'm assuming we're going to get those answers at some point.
I'm
So that
sure. Yeah.
happens. Maddie and is reunited with Vildar and Tay, who had come to say help out at the battle as
Yeah.
well. Olivia's okay. Pretty much everyone else makes it through. Yana and Shay kind of go off together, and
Mm-hmm.
in at the end, and that's when you learn about Mari Santeca being
Yeah.
born soon. The here was my biggest complaint with the end of this book, because it ends like boom and then it's done.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
Cataclysm,
Yeah.
it
Did.
ends with like the battle ends, and then you get a few chapters of like in the
Like
aftermath
resolutions. Yeah.
of resolution where you're kind of like, here's what happened and
Yeah.
how we're gonna move forward. And this one just kind of just ends very suddenly.
Yeah.
And while that's okay sometimes for a book that closes out a phase of storytelling, it felt a little bit jarring and a little bit odd that they wouldn't have like they wrote a massive book. Like that book is huge.
It's thick. It's beefy.
And they didn't devote any time at the end. Like Cavan Scott decided they didn't devote any time at the end to resolve more with what just happened and dive into that and what's going on, which is fine. Like because I'm gonna continue to give them the benefit of the doubt just because of how great they've handled everything High Republic so far. But what did you think about that? Because were you okay with that, or did that kind of not sit well with you?
Yeah, it was jarring. And so I read Path of Vengeance before I read Cataclysm.
That's right.
And
I forgot
so
about that.
but after reading both of them, to me it makes more sense to read Cataclysm first and then Path of Vengeance, because the main stuff happens in Cataclysm,
Right.
and then like all the side stuff, you can picture what's going on with the big battle while all this is happening, underground and in the tunnels and everything. And and the thing that and the abrupt end didn't really catch me as off guard as the mother, her whole end and that big revelation coming in this book instead of Cataclysm. Like, I feel like that should, but at the same time, Cataclysm didn't really tell the story of the mother.
Right.
She was the main, her story was being told in Path of Vengeance. And so it would have been weird for them to just pop up at the end of, Cataclysm and be like, oh, we captured the mother. Oh, she's a force user. Like it would have been this.
She's
this
related to one of our own.
Right. And so I feel like maybe it could have been executed a little bit differently between the two books. I don't know. Because the way I've always looked at it is you should be able to read like the main novels, like the main Del Rey novels, right?
Right.
And get the gist of the story, and that should, and then everything else should kind of supplement those, just like these books should be, like the other Star Wars books, around the Skywalker saga should supplement the movies, right? And kind of the time period there.
The main content, yes.
Right. And so this time around, though, it was one of those, middle grade novels, has this huge revelation in it and basically is the whole climax of, phase 2. I almost feel like they should have just done, instead of doing a middle grade novel that attaches to Cataclysm, I feel like they should have just done, basically this story.
Well, young adult. It was a YA. It was a YA.
I feel like they should have combined these two stories into one massive story and then split that into two different books and made it a proper trilogy.
Just do like a
books,
trilogy, right. And do like a part 1, 2,
right.
Or just do Cataclysm and then whatever. Right. Yeah, okay, and then just have the young adult novels be just something separate,
something
like
completely, something different, But
you could have just had a lot of the Battle of Jeddah stuff be the young adult novel.
A whole nother book of Battle of Jeddah. But there was enough that happened in Path of Vengeance, because like you said, this is a really beefy book. There was a lot that happens in this book that could have went really. It was.
It's a whole barbecue chicken of a book.
A big old boy. Yeah. And I feel like had they just taken all the content, took the titles away from the books, took all the content, split it into two main novels, I think it would have made a lot more sense. And I think it would, and all that epilogue stuff at the end of Cataclysm, put it at the end of the, that last book. And I think it would have been a great closeout for phase 2. I still think phase 2 got a good closeout. I still think that was, it was a satisfying ending, but like you said, it was really like just abrupt. It was very blunt on the end. Yeah.
Well, that wraps up Path of Vengeance, unless you got something else that you'd like to get off your chest with this book. I'm thinking for everyone next time, I'm thinking we just do Quest for Planet X and Tales of Enlightenment.
Let's do it.
We could do that, or we could just do Quest for Planet X and then just crank out all the other short stories. But I'm thinking Tales of Enlightenment would pair better with Quest for Planet of X. And then, I agree. And then we could just wrap up phase 2 with the last Tales of Light and Life stories, and then we'll move into phase 1 of the High Republic and jump forward 150 years.
Oh my God, we're gonna be talking about Young Jedi Knights for a minute.
Oh my goodness, Young Jedi Adventures. I love the little young. I can't wait for we have grown people here. We're gonna be talking about the toddler show for a few weeks.
It is what it is. It's canon,
and there are things to be learned from every form of Star Wars storytelling. Let me tell you,
there is. So,
well, everyone, you can follow us here on the Star Wars Newsnet YouTube channel. Be sure to like and subscribe for other content like this. We'll be dropping this Monday nights, I believe. Right, Brian? As always, we're recording this on a Sunday. We will be here on Thursday night for Star Wars Newsnet Live. Brian Jay, I think, will be on there this week, and myself. Join us every Thursday night for the Star Wars Newsnet Live show. It is a good time. I just put a little short out there on YouTube about just whether or not John Boyega needs to come back for the Rey movie, for that one to be a major success. Personally, and I think he does. I think that they kind of need him. Brian, I don't know, we talked about this a little bit on the live show.
I missed a big episode on Thursday.
It was, and I'm going to bring it up again this week because I was curious on your thoughts.
Yeah.
So basically it was, I just want to know, like, and we'll talk about the live show, but like my thinking is that it's pretty critical that he decides to come back. If not, I think it says more about what's going on behind the scenes than we know. Anyway, good stuff there. Check that out. That just a quick short. Leave your comments. Let me know what you think. Join us always on Star Wars News Net Live. Brian and I are going to be working on some fun, like other pre-recorded videos that we're going to be dropping here in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for that. Brian, got anything before we get out of here?
No, that's it. To make sure to go check out my website, StarWarsCanon.net. You guys can find this entire timeline, basically the checklist we're going off of for the timeline show, keeping everything in order. So, and if you guys aren't necessarily canon fans, I know there's a lot of Star Wars fans out there that aren't big on like what the official canon is. If you want more into like the legends and the EU stuff, that whole timeline is on there too. So definitely go check that out. StarWarsCanon.net.
Absolutely. Check out everything on Star Wars Newsnet for everything else Star Wars as well. Until next time, for light and life, everyone.
May the Force be with you.